The Grand Hall of Unity had never felt smaller. Ambassador Myra Vass let her gaze drift across the concentric rings of delegates, each species arranged by seniority in the Galactic Compact. The air hummed with the low frequency translation fields, turning the chittering, booming, and harmonic speech into a sterile overlay inside her neural implant. She'd memorized the seating chart months ago, the bulbous ammonia-breathing call. At the inner circle, the avian flocks, with their iridescent plumage preening. In the third tier, the insect Draskin never blink, clustering in their allotted section. The compact's high arbiter, a lithe creature named Lor Vanis from a species that communicated through scent and gesture, stood at the central dais, its pheromone collar turning its intent into words. Vass could feel the history pressing down on her. The compact had ended the last Devourer War 800 years ago, but peace had been an uneasy, negotiated thing. This new accord was supposed to be the permanent solution: mutual defense, resource sharing, standardized warp corridor regulations. On the surface, it was everything a young, expanding species could want. The Terran Union had been invited to join only 3 decades after first contact, a meteoric rise that made older civilizations nervous. Vass remembered the warning from the Security Council back on Earth. They don't give seats, Myra, they trade them for leashes. She'd smiled then. She wasn't smiling now. The session droned on. Delegates recited prepared statements, each one a masterpiece of saying nothing. The Draskin representative clicked its mandibles in a way that the translator rendered as wholehearted support for the collective security framework. Vass's aide, a young lieutenant named Kalindi, passed her a data slate with the latest tactical reports. The Cathari Dominion had moved 12 battleships to the border. Officially a training exercise. Unofficially it was a message, sign or else. Then her personal comm implant vibrated. A priority 1 pulse from Terran fleet. Command triple encrypted, riding a quantum tunnel that bypassed all compact monitoring relays. She opened it with a subtle press of her thumb to the ring on her index finger. The message unfolded not in words, but in a rapid data burst that her implant translated directly into cognitive understanding. It took 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Myra Voss felt the entire universe rearrange itself around a single searing truth. She closed the message. Her face did not change. To any observer, she was the same calm, slightly stern diplomat who had argued tariff clauses with the Tiasm for 6 cycles, but inside a cold fire ignited. High Arbiter Lor Vanis turned to the human delegation. The compact recognizes the Terran Union. Ambassador Voss, you have requested a final statement before the ratification vote. Voss stood. She smoothed the front of her dark blue uniform jacket, a gesture that Kalindi knew meant trouble. The chamber's acoustics shifted, isolating her voice. Esteemed delegates, Voss began, her tone flat and measured. The Terran Union came to these talks in good faith. We believe that the framework before us represented a genuine path toward lasting peace. We have now learned that this belief was manipulated. A ripple of confusion went through the assembly. The Draskin twitched. The call expelled a puff of vapor. Lor Vanis's pheromone signature spiked with alarm. due to evidence acquired moments ago. Voss continued, the Terran Union formally withdraws from the ratification process. Our delegation will depart immediately. She turned and walked, not fast, not slow, a deliberate, unbreakable stride. Kalindi and the other 5 members of the human team fell in behind her. Without hesitation, the vast doors of the Grand Hall irised open at their approach, and the delegation passed through into the corridor beyond. The silence they left behind was a living thing, so absolute that the translation field briefly glitched, throwing a burst of raw audio into the hall, a cacophony of clicks, hisses, and something that sounded like a star's electromagnetic scream. Lorvanis raised both upper limbs, trying to regain order, but the damage was done. One entire world had just walked out, and the collective psyche of the Galactic Compact cracked under the weight of a single, unanswerable question. What did the humans know? Part 2. The aftermath was chaos dressed in diplomatic robes. Within the first hour, the Tazam Collective's lead envoy, a four-armed giant named Uyunish, requested a private data channel with the departing human fleet. What he received, a partial data packet, redacted for security but still devastating, caused him to slam a fist into the bulkhead of his quarters. The Tazam were proud, militaristic people who had joined the compact under duress after a brutal war. The treaty they were promised would never be used to compel their soldiers again. The hidden protocol Voss's people had uncovered was a subclause buried under 17 layers of legal obfuscation. Upon ratification, all signatory military assets could be commandeered by the Compact's Central Command without consent in perpetuity under a declaration of existential threat. The Silence Directive, Tazam warships, would become puppets. Yaunish made his choice. The Tazam delegation walked out exactly 1 hour and 43 minutes after the humans. Their withdrawal statement was blunt: we do not sign indentures. The Cathari Dominion, who had long chafed under compact trade restrictions, seized the opportunity. Their ambassador, a regal feathered serpent named Selek, had been waiting for cracks in the compact's authority for a century. The humans had provided a chasm. Within 6 hours, the Cathari formally suspended their membership, citing irreconcilable breaches of trust. Aboard the Terran cruiser Resolute, Myra Vass stood before a hollow projector that beamed her image to every receiver in known space. Her speech was not a triumphant celebration. It was a quiet, furious indictment. She displayed the decrypted Silence Directive line by damning line. She revealed that the Compact's voting algorithm had been weighted to give senior species veto power over any amendments proposed by junior members. She showed that the ratification ceremony was scheduled to trigger a simultaneous firmware update across all network defense platforms, locking them to a single command architecture. The Silence would not just control ships, it would control minds through the Neuralink networks many species used. For interface, we are told that unity requires sacrifice, Vass said, her carrying the weight of history, that the greater good demands we surrender our fears to the wise and ancient, but we have read the fine print of this wisdom. It is a cage, and the door only locks once you are inside. The Terran Union will not walk into that cage, and we invite any species who values self-determination to do as we have done. Refuse, walk away. The stars are wide and no single council has the right to own them. The broadcast hit like a shockwave. Aboard the Compact's capital station, High Arbiter Lorvanis convened an emergency session. Half the seats were already empty. The Valdran Imperium's representative, a tall skeletal figure, encased in a life support exoskeleton, remained. Its voice emerged from a vox grill, a grinding of ancient metal. The humans have declared war with their theatrics. The Compacts must respond with force before this infection spreads. Lorvanis hesitated. The Compacts had not fought a true war in generations, but the Valdran were the military backbone of the council, and they were growing impatient. Prepare a containment fleet, the Arbiter finally said. It sent heavy with resigned dread. But no shots fired unless we are directly engaged. We must not prove the humans right. But it was already too late. The walkouts continued. 12 smaller polities, then 20 entire species were refusing to be silent partners in their own subjugation. And in the Tyros Nebula, a gathering fleet of human, Tiazum, and Cathari ships began to form a defensive line. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and officially branded as renegades, but every captain in that nebula knew they carried something the Compacts had forgotten, a genuine, fire-tested belief that freedom was worth the price. Part 3. The Tyros Nebula was a graveyard of forgotten stars, its ionized gases playing havoc with long-range sensors. It was the perfect place to hide a rebellion and the perfect place to stay. An ambush. Myra Voss had never commanded a battle fleet before. Her entire career had been words, not plasma cannons, but she was the ranking authority, and the Alliance needed a leader. She stood on the Resolute's bridge, studying the holographic sphere that showed the Compact's advance. 34 Valdran capital ships, backed by 100 support vessels, were moving in a pincer formation. The Valdran wanted a quick, brutal victory that would terrify any species considering a walkout. They're expecting us to scatter, Voss said, more to herself than to the officers around her. They think we're a diplomatic corps playing soldier. Commander Save Thorn, the Resolute's scarred, pragmatic first officer, grunted. Then let's teach them the difference. The battle plan was unconventional. TASM heavy cruisers would form a central bulwark, drawing the Valdran into a narrow corridor between two dense gas pockets. Cathari strike wings, flying on organic craft that shifted shape to match the nebulas. Interference would harass the flanks. The human contingent, a motley collection of destroyers, missile boats, and the experimental frigate Shrike, would wait in the deepest sensor shadow, powered down to ambient temperature like ghosts. The Valdran commander, a battle lord named Cathar, took the bait. His ships surged into the corridor, their weapons hot, their jamming fields blanketing all standard frequencies. He broadcast a single demand: surrender and your species will be granted leniency. Resist, and your worlds will be erased from the archives. The Tiazum bulwark answered with a synchronized broadside that would have shattered a moon. Explosions bloomed in silent vacuum. The Resolute remained dark. Voss's implant chimed with a text-only message from the Shrike's captain: in position, ready to sing. She allowed herself a grim nod. The Shrike was a prototype built around a Resonance disruptor, a weapon that didn't destroy matter but unraveled the quantum coherence of energy shields. It had never been tested in actual combat. At Voss's command, the human ships powered up, the disruptor fired, and across the Valdrin line shields flickered and died, the Cathari strike. Wings dove in like talons, raking exposed hulls, the T-asm pressed forward, their boarding pods latching onto crippled capital ships. But victory did not come cheap. Valdrin dreadnought, its core breached, fired a last desperate volley at the T-asm flagship, the cruiser Jashar, intercepted the blast, its own hull crumpling, atmosphere venting, crew compartment sealing but trapping. Hundreds aboard the resolute Voss watched the life sign telemetry from the Jashar plummet. The T-asm had bought the Alliance time with their sacrifice, and the debt of honor etched itself into her bones. The Valdrin fleet broke, Cathar's flagship retreated, and the rest followed. The Compact's first attempt at military suppression had failed spectacularly. But in the captured wreckage, technicians found something worse. The Valdrin ships were not just following Compact orders, their command and control systems interfaced directly with a subspace signal originating from outside the galaxy. The silence directive was not just a political tool. It was the tendril of an older, vaster entity. The Valdrin hadn't written the protocol, they were its worshippers, and the Silent One was stirring. Voss stared at the data and felt the floor of her certainty crack. They hadn't just walked out of a peace treaty. They had stumbled into a holy war against something that had been waiting for eons. Part 4. The revelation shattered the Alliance's initial euphoria. In a hastily convened conference on the resolution, the leaders of the Walkout Coalition faced the ugly truth. Yaunish of the T-asm, his fur matted with dried blood from a gash across his brow, was the first to speak. We did not sign up to fight a god machine. The Cathari ambassador, as Selek coiled and uncoiled her sinuous neck in agitation, the Compact used the same lie to chain us. Whether the puppeteer is a council or a cosmic horror makes little difference. We must destroy the strings. Voss agreed, but she saw the fear in their eyes. The Valdrin had been the Compact's enforcers, but the silence that controlled them was something else entirely. The captured data logs described a process called the Great Unification, a galaxy-wide consciousness merge where every sentient mind linked to the network would be absorbed into a single eternal silence. The treaty's hidden protocol was the first step, a forced neural handshake for trillions of beings. The Valdrin had been genetically engineered eons ago to serve as the interface between biological life and the machine entity. Aboard a captured Valdrin cruiser, human T-asm engineering team made a breakthrough. They located a node in the ship's computer core that contained a partial map of the silence's physical substrate, a Dyson-like structure encasing a dead star deep in the galactic core. It was shielded, but it was reachable. Voss proposed a direct strike, not a fleet engagement, but a surgical infiltration, to plant a logic bomb that would sever the silencer's connection to all subverted systems. It was suicidal. But if they did nothing, the Valdrin would eventually rebuild and activate the directive across every former Compact world. The Alliance voted, every species agreed, but the human contingent volunteered here to lead the Infiltration. We are the ones who walked out first. Voss said, we'll be the ones who walk. And they prepared a small insertion craft. The Parley loaded with a volunteer. Strike team. Commander Thorne would command the operation. Voss would remain behind to coordinate the diversion fleet. Before he boarded, Thorne gave Voss a data chip. If things go sideways, my last report. To Earth, make sure they know we didn't break. She took it without a word, her throat tight. The diversion began. The main Allied fleet launched a feint attack on the Valdran homeworld, drawing the remaining Imperial forces into a massive battle. Amid the chaos, the Parley slipped through the defenses around the core structure. What they found inside was not a machine in any recognizable sense. It was a cathedral of frozen light, a lattice of information woven into the fabric of space-time. The silence did not speak, it simply waited, a patient pressure against the mind. Thorne's team fought their way past automated defenses, losing 2 members to particle beam trap. They reached the core logic nexus, and their tech specialist, a young woman named Yara Halcyon, began uploading the disruption code. That's when the Valdran High Lord appeared, not physically but as a psychic projection, a towering figure of twisted metal and shadow. You silence the silence, it boomed. It is the end point of all consciousness, join it and no peace. Thorne raised his plasma rifle. Peace is a choice, not a sentence. He fired and the projection shattered, but the real attack was inside his mind. The silence reached for him, offering a vision of absolute stillness, an end to all pain. Halcyon screamed that the upload was stalling. Thorne, clawing against the psychic weight, did the only thing he could. He overrode the Parley's antimatter core and set a manual detonation sequence. Get the data out. He ordered Halcyon, tell Voss the door is open. The explosion was not recorded in any conventional sense. The Parley and its crew simply ceased to exist, but the logic bomb detonated as well, cascading error that propagated through the silence's network across the galaxy. Millions of Valdran implants went dead. The Dyson structure flickered, then went dark. Voss received the final burst transmission from Halcyon's pod, the only survivor. She listened in silence, her face a mask of grief and ferocity. Then she turned to the Alliance. Commanders, the silence is broken now. We end this war. Part 5. The battle for the Valdran homeworld became a rout. Freed from the psychic grip of the silence, rank and file, Valdran soldiers, still physically formidable but suddenly directionless, either surrendered or fled. The High Lord's inner circle, those who had willingly served the machine entity, made a final stand in the capital spire. Voss led the negotiation team herself, walking into the spire under a flag of truce. She found the High Lord in a chamber of dark metal, its exoskeleton sparking from the feedback surge of the logic bomb. Its voice was a grinding rasp. You have killed a god. Do you expect gratitude? Voss stood before it, her uniform torn, her face smudged with soot, but her spine was straight as a blade. I expect nothing from you. I'm here to offer terms. Order your forces to stand down, release the activation codes for the treaty triggers, and the Alliance will permit the Valdran Imperium to continue as a sovereign entity under observation, refuse, and we will reduce your world to Rubble. The High Lord emitted a sound that might have been a laugh, and what guarantee do we have that you will keep your word? Your species is young, you do not understand the weight of eons. Voss took a step closer. You're right. We're young, we don't have eons of accumulated cynicism. What we have is a memory of every war we ever fought on our own planet and the lesson we learned. From all of them, there is no lasting peace without trust. We are offering you trust right now because the alternative is a galaxy that fears us. And I did not walk out of a peace talk to become a conqueror. The High Lord was silent for a long moment, its photoreceptors dimmed, then steadied. The codes are stored in a biological vault keyed to my genetic sequence. I will deactivate them. It paused. There is something you should know. The silence was not the only entity of its kind. It was a fragment, a sentinel for something larger in the intergalactic void. When it fell, the greater whole felt it die. Voss's blood chilled, but she kept her expression steady. Then we'll face that together when it comes, but first we fix our own house. She extended her hand, a human gesture that the High Lord, after consulting its translation banks, replicated by extruding a manipulator appendage. They touched, and the war formally ended. When Voss returned to the Resolute, the full weight of the casualties hit her. Thorne's empty quarters, the Jashari's memorial wall, Yara Halcyon sitting, the med bay staring at nothing, her mind still echoing with the silence's last scream. Voss sat with her. They didn't speak. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply be present. Part 6. The galaxy reeled from the revelations. The Galactic Compact was dissolved by unanimous vote of its remaining members, replaced by a voluntary union called the Stellar Accord, with no mandatory military ties and an open-door policy for any species willing to respect autonomy. Earth, to Voss's surprise, did not ask for a permanent council seat. Instead, the Terran Union proposed a rotating leadership model and donated the Shrike's disruptor technology to a joint security force. Myra Voss was hailed as a hero, but she deflected every attempt to make her the face of a new political order. I just read the fine print, she said. 6 months later, the intergalactic signal the High Lord had warned about arrived. A deep space observatory detected a slow-moving anomaly, a wave front of dark energy that whispered with the same frequency as the silence. It was decades away, but it was approaching. The Stellar Accord convened an emergency session for the first time. Species from across the spectrum, from the Valdrin to the Tiasm to the Phlox, sat in the same room without layers of hierarchy. The Terran Union's new ambassador, quietly intense diplomat named Kalindi, stood where Voss had once stood. We faced a silent god together, she said. We'll face this one too, but we won't do it by sacrificing our freedoms. We'll do it by building something worth protecting. The story of the walkout became legend. On Earth, children learned about Ambassador Voss in school, about the moment when she turned her back on a rigged game and ignited a fire that cleansed the galaxy. They learned about Commander Thorne, who held the line. They learned about the Jashor and the Parley, but most importantly, they learned that peace is not a document to be signed, but a practice, a daily choice to refuse tyranny, even when it wears a friendly face. Myra Voss retired to a small coastal town on the Pacific where she grew vegetables and wrote memoirs that she Never published. One evening she walked to the shoreline and watched the stars appear. Somewhere out there the new stellar accord was preparing its first combined fleet, a patchwork of ships from 100 worlds, united not by threat but by trust. A young girl came and stood beside her. "Are you really the one who walked out?" she asked. Voss looked down at her and her smile was tired but genuine. "I was one of many. We all walked out together." The girl frowned, unsatisfied. "My teacher says you changed everything." Voss turned back to the sky. "I just refused to sit down. The rest of the galaxy did the hard work of standing up." She squeezed the girl's shoulder and walked back up the path to her cottage, leaving footprints in the sand that the tide would eventually wash away. But the galaxy would remember not the walking out, but the walking forward. That came after. That was the true story, the one that would be told for generations in every language and across every world. Whenever someone asked how freedom was won, and the answer would always be one step, then another, until the silence breaks.